Water is the lifeblood of the American farm. Every aspect of farm life is dependent on the availability of a quality water source. Whether for livestock, agricultural, or personal needs, most rural residents in the U.S. get their water from private wells. But that lifeblood, which we often take so much for granted, can easily be contaminated. Many farmstead activities create potential hazards that may affect the quality of groundwater due to their proximity to the well. These hazards can be avoided by following principles of wellhead protection, similar to those which are used to protect public supply wells under the EPA's Wellhead Protection Program, and by using plain common sense. Hello, I'm Bill Harris. District and area conservationists like you and I can provide technical assistance to rural residents who need information about farmstead well protection. We can also help those residents who may already have well problems. This program, and the video training series that follows, provides information on how to offer this assistance and identifies activities around the farmstead that can adversely affect rural wells. Additional subjects in this series include well plugging, water quality, principles of well location, well design, construction, completion, and quality control, well maintenance and rehabilitation, and water treatment. This program you're watching now deals only with activities that occur around the farmstead, as opposed to crop and pasture land. Several other programs address those needs. But now, let's take a look at a visit I made recently to a rural farmstead in my district.
You get him yet?
Yeah, I'm holding. Honey, where's that checklist?
Right here.
Thanks. Yeah, hello, Bill. Hi, Joe Willard, how you doing? Well, we've been reading a lot in the paper about water quality in the county, so we filled out that Farm Bureau's water quality checklist they sent out to everyone. Uh-huh. Well, frankly, my wife and I had some questions about some of the items. Can you come out and go over it with us? Great. Yeah, we'll be here all day.
There are a number of reference materials that district conservationists have at their disposal to help evaluate farmstead water quality, such as the SCS Field Office Technical Guides, Principles of Groundwater for Resource Management Systems, Soil Surveys, Citizens Guide to Groundwater Protection, published by EPA, State Drinking Water Standards, and the Water Quality Checklist, published by the American Farm Bureau Federation.
Joe, the DC's here.
Good to see you again, Bill.
Good to see you, Joe.
You remember my wife, Ann?
Of course. Nice seeing you again, Ann. How are the kids? I guess they're getting pretty big by now?
Oh, well, they're both doing great. Jesse's out on a field trip today. Thanks for asking, and thanks for coming out here to go over this water quality checklist.
Sure, no problem. Let's take a look.
Here you go. You know, after going over it, we've realized there's a lot of stuff around here that might affect our well.
Sure. I tell you what, this checklist can be a darn good help. Why don't we bring it along and go take a look at the well?
Okay. Well, the well's out back here near the barn.
Wells are susceptible to many contaminants that may be found around the farmstead. Well location and construction records are important for this reason. Any information that can be obtained about the well, such as construction records, will help determine its vulnerability. What are the characteristics of the aquifer? Where is the well located in relationship to potential contaminants? Is the well dug, driven, or drilled? What is the depth? What is the age of the well?
Judging from your checklist and drilling record, looks like your well's been properly constructed and completed.
We paid to have it done right. We're not about to scrimp on our family's health.
Yeah. There's 20 feet of surface casing down to a tight clay layer, and 10 feet of well screen in the gravel at the bottom. There's also a good gravel pack to keep out the sand.
That's good. Have you had your water tested within the past year?
We had it tested when we first put it in 10 years ago.
I guess we better get that done again.
I realize that getting the water tested can be expensive, but I really advise that you do so. There can be all kinds of contaminants like bacteria, nitrates, pesticides, and petroleum products that really can affect your family's health. When we're finished with the checklist and this inspection, you'll know what to have the water tested for. I'll give you the names and numbers of the state agencies and the private laboratories that can do the test. Is this your only well?
No, my grandfather dug a well over there by the feedlot.
Yeah, we used it right up until when we drilled this one.
We'll look at that later. Usually one of the first things we want to look at is the septic system and its relationship to the well.
Behind the house, down the hill.
The leach field drain lines run along this way.
Looks good on the surface. According to the soil survey, you have a satisfactory soil type. The leach field is far enough away and downhill from the well.
The leach field can be a source of contamination. Even if the leach field is downhill from the well, the cone of depression may draw contaminants into the well.
Joe, if you find a problem when you have your water tested, we can examine this further to see if it's caused by your leach field. Of course, waste storage could also be a problem, but I don't think so, because we took the well into account when we designed this waste lagoon. By the way, how's it doing?
Oh, it's doing a good job. Of course, I stay right on schedule with my pumping to make sure we don't let it get too full.
That's good. But speaking of animal waste, didn't you say your feedlot is close to that old well that Ann's grandfather dug?
Well, yes, it is. Probably 100 feet from the feedlot to the well. The well's over here.
But we don't use it anymore.
Well, here she is. We haven't had her open in a long time.
Yeah, waste from the feedlot area could be working its way in the old well and then across to your new well. Depending on the depths of the two wells, this one could be seeping into the gravel aquifer tapped by the house well. How deep is this well?
22 feet.
There is a possibility. Do you ever plan on using this well again?
No, we don't imagine so.
Then I recommend sealing this well. If anything was to get into the old well, it could be flowing over to the new one. Besides, with kids running around here, you have a real safety hazard too. I'll give you the names and addresses of the state agencies that regulate well sealing.
Old, unused, or abandoned wells need to be properly plugged for safety, as well as contamination reasons. Well plugging is now controlled by law in many states. Although laws differ slightly, common requirements include cleaning out any debris so it won't pose continued problems, and making sure the water-bearing zone is sealed.
You keep any ag chemicals on hand?
Sure.
How do you store them?
We keep them stored away safely here in this shed.
I've got quite a bit, actually.
I should say so.
Well, we keep saving them because we think we might need them someday.
We just don't know what else we can do with them. The landfill won't take them.
That is a problem. I have a list back at the office of the appropriate agencies you can contact for disposal procedures. Let me send it to you.
Well, thanks, Bill.
Leftover chemicals are a common problem on most farms. The easiest solution is to not buy more chemicals than you need. But if you do, follow instructions on the label for proper storage and disposal. Also, many counties sponsor hazardous waste pickup programs. Some state environmental agencies set specific procedures for disposal.
While we're talking about chemicals, let's take a look at where you've been mixing them and rinsing out your spray equipment.
We're really careful about that.
And I always mix according to the instructions. And I triple rinse the tanks and the containers, and I spray the rinse water back over the crops away from the house and the well.
And we've been really careful with the lawn fertilizer and the pesticides we put on our garden.
Good. Is this your only fuel storage system?
No, this is a diesel for the tractors. Gas for the trucks is over there.
The lack of grass around the fuel tank indicates to me you've spilt some fuel on the ground.
Well, yeah, I probably spilled some, especially when I let the kids do it.
You're pretty far from your well, so I'm not too concerned. But distances of even several hundred feet may not be sufficient protection. It's very important to be careful to avoid spills. It may not be a problem today, but it could be one tomorrow.
We really need to be more careful, Joe.
Yeah, I agree. I knew a family had one of those underground storage tanks with a leak in it. Really messed up their well.
Was that the Johnson farm?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, I remember. The kids got really sick.
What do you do with your used motor oil and antifreeze?
Well, we don't ever just dump it on the ground. We keep it in containers over here in the barn. I spread this oil on the driveway to keep the dust and the anthills down.
Doesn't your driveway run right by your house well?
Yes, it does.
Guess I could be causing ourselves a problem here.
A definite possibility. I sure do suggest that you stop spreading it.
Most service stations will recycle used oil. You should dispose of antifreeze, oil filters, batteries, and hazardous household waste properly.
So you say you have an ant problem. What about termites?
No, we have an exterminator come out every year.
They treat it when they need to.
Some of that stuff they use is pretty potent. I'd find out what they're using. Then I'd have it tested for when you have your water checked.
Well, that's a good idea. I noticed a lot of pesticides are mentioned on the checklist.
I'm glad you took the time to fill it out. It really got you and Ann thinking about your water quality.
So, what do you think?
For the most part, things look pretty good. I didn't see any problems on the surface with your septic system.
And our animal waste treatment system's doing just fine.
But don't forget, you need to get that abandoned well cleaned out and sealed.
And Joe, we need to change our habits about those chemicals.
Yeah, and the way I'm handling the oil.
In general, I'd say you're both pretty aware of what you're doing around the well.
We better be. It's the only water we've got.
The best thing is to prevent contamination in the first place and have your water tested.
You bet.
Now here's the information I was telling you about. You know what to test for, and keep good records.
We'll do that. And thanks, Bill, for coming out.
My pleasure. Now best check and test the water once a year. And if it indicates a problem, we'll get together again and figure out some alternatives to solve the problem. It's been a pleasure working with you. Let me know what the test results show. Goodbye, Joe. Ann.
Bye, Bill.
Bye.
Activities at the rural home site or farmstead probably represent the most immediate hazard to drinking water quality in rural America. With the assistance of federal, state, and local agency specialists, you can make a difference not only in individual wells, but in the water resources of entire communities.
Our top story today. Residents of the Sunnybrook area face the possibility that their private water wells may be contaminated with benzene, the same substance that infiltrated the famed Perrier Spring in France in 1989. Authorities believe that vandals dumped the benzene into an abandoned water well where it may have migrated to other wells in the Sunnybrook area. Tests of water taken from nearby wells are underway. Meanwhile, in other news,
That's the kind of story I hear quite a bit.
an abandoned water well that's become a threat to the health and safety of the people who live nearby. I'm Bill Harris, a district conservationist with the Soil Conservation Service, and helping citizens in rural areas with the plugging of old wells is becoming a part of my job. Just like the news story we heard a minute ago, wells like these can be a conduit for contamination that can reach the aquifer and damage the water supply over a wide area. And an unplugged well just invites dumping. Wells are often abandoned when residents gain access to a public water supply and no longer need their wells, or when a well stops producing and is replaced by a new one. And when small farms are combined into large ones, wells are often abandoned. What I'm saying is that there are thousands of open wells across the country, and in order to protect the health and safety of the people who live near them, they need to be properly plugged. The consequences of leaving unused wells either unplugged or improperly plugged are serious. Today we'll show you the steps recommended by the Soil Conservation Service to help land users protect themselves from the hazards of unplugged wells. At the conclusion of this program, you should know the major well plugging principles, be able to explain to a land user where to get historical and geological information for their well, be able to discuss well plugging techniques, and you'll know how to get additional well plugging assistance for a land user. This program will give you enough knowledge to help a land user get the well plugging job done right. You've got to look at any unused well as a potential problem. That's part of the conservation planning process. Recommendations that you make on well plugging are within the conservation planning scope of effort. The extent of assistance the Soil Conservation Service provides varies from state to state and depends on the decisions of the state conservationist based on state regulations and particular geologic conditions. It's important to become familiar with all state and local laws, regulations, and permit procedures that have to do with well plugging. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency includes well plugging guidelines in this Manual of Water Well Construction Practice. What are we trying to accomplish when we plug a well? There are 4 basic principles: elimination of a physical hazard, prevention of groundwater contamination, yield conservation and maintenance of hydrostatic head of aquifers, and prevention of intermingling of desirable and undesirable water. Keep in mind that well plugging can be a pretty simple procedure or a very technical, highly specialized process. That's why we need to gather as much information as possible about the well we're plugging. The first step is to recommend a water quality analysis, especially if you suspect the well is contaminated. Water analysis is vital to prevent sealing a source of contamination inside the hole. It is also necessary for you to know the hydrogeology, the kind of well construction, and the historic and future land use in your district. Next, determine the depth and diameter of the well. With simple dug or driven wells, you can often take these measurements yourself with something as simple as a weighted tape. With others, the land user will have to search through well records and reports to get the information. These sources might include farm records, driller records, state or county well records, or contact with the state engineer, state or U.S. Geological Survey, departments of natural resources, health departments, and other agencies. Research on neighboring wells also can provide clues as to what may be encountered during the plugging process. Geophysical or video surveys may be used to get additional information. All of this ensures that the land user gets the best possible plugging job at the lowest cost. To understand well plugging, you first have to understand wells. Remember from our first video, there are 3 types of wells: dug, driven, and drilled.
Okay, take it up, guys.
This is Susan Wilson, a geologist with the Soil Conservation Service. We're here at the request of a land user to give assistance in the plugging of some abandoned wells. What do we have here, Susan?
Hi, Bill. We've got a pretty good-sized dug well here with a lot of debris in the hole.
Tell us about dug wells.
A dug well is usually excavated to just below the water table. It'll be about 2 feet or more in diameter and will have a porous lining.
Aren't there certain things that are common to the plugging of all kinds of wells?
There sure are. They are measurement, disinfection, plugging, surface casing removal, and backfilling and mounding.
Susan, take us through the plugging procedure step by step.
Okay, this is how we do it in this state. We've cleared this well of all debris and physical obstructions, especially organic material and pumping equipment. We know this because we pumped the water down to the lowest level possible. If there had been obstructions that could not be removed, we would need to check with the state regulations to see how to proceed. Now we let the water return to its normal level. This is the time to test the water for contamination so you can monitor other wells in the aquifer to see if they've been contaminated too. After that, Bill, the new water needs to be disinfected with bleach or chlorine to achieve a concentration of 200 milligrams per liter.
Isn't it time to plug the hole?
Yes, it is. First, inexpensive fill material is poured into the well to within 4 feet of the surface. Then you dig out the top 4 feet of the hole lining. Next, we'll pour in a 1 to 2 foot thick layer of dry bentonite.
Tell us why you're using bentonite.
It's one of the common materials we use to plug wells. You could also use cement or a mixture of bentonite and cement. Bentonite is a type of clay grout that swells up to 15 times its volume when mixed with water. Here, let me show you. A solid plug like this can prevent contaminant migration. Here's how it looks down in the well. The bentonite forms a tight seal that cuts off all zones within the well. The grout also overflows to seal the top of the well casing.
We've used the measurements we've already taken to determine how much grout and fill material we needed.
Finally, fill the well to the top with compacted, low permeability soil material. There should be a mounded surface. There may be other state or local regulations you'll need to follow as well.
That's how we handle a dug well. Now tell us about a driven well, Susan.
A driven well will be much smaller in diameter. They're made by driving well points into the ground until they reach the water table. First, we remove the old well equipment and disinfect the well, just as we did with the dug well. Then cement or bentonite grout is poured into the hole using a tremie pipe that goes inside the well casing down to the bottom of the hole. We continue to pump the grout down the tremie pipe until it comes out the top of the casing and while we are withdrawing the tremie pipe. This ensures a good seal. Sometimes we use dry bentonite pellets or granules instead of liquid grout, but care must be taken to prevent bridging.
Susan, what's bridging?
Bridging occurs when fragments are added too rapidly and hang up to create voids which can lead to a later collapse or allow pathways for contaminants. Next, we pull the casing and dig a hole for backfill. If the casing cannot be removed, we have to dig around the casing and cut it off at least 4 feet below the ground surface. Last, we fill the top 4 feet with compacted soil, just as we did with the dug well, and round off the top into a mound. Remember, these are the preferred methods. You may also have to follow state or local regulations.
That's our driven well. For drilled wells, we use 2 different types of plugging techniques. Right, Susan?
Right. The type of plugging technique depends upon the type of aquifer involved. There's the unconfined or water table aquifer and the confined aquifer. A drilled well in an unconfined aquifer is plugged much like a driven well. That's because they're both found in similar geologic conditions. First, as with all types of wells, we remove obstructions or debris and then disinfect the well. Then, grout is pumped through the tremie pipe from the bottom up, filling the hole. Again, bentonite chunks or granules could be used instead. In a very deep or large diameter drilled well, we add clean granular fill at the bottom to reduce costs. We must use a Tremie pipe for this to make sure we don't have any bridging. Next, the top 4 feet of the casing are cut off and removed. We then add an additional 2 feet of bentonite. And just like the other wells, we fill the top portion with compacted low permeability soil mounded at the surface.
How do we plug a drilled artesian well? The water in a confined or artesian aquifer is under pressure, so the plugging techniques must be a bit more complicated.
If you've got a flowing artesian well that's no longer needed, it should be plugged in a hurry. It's not only wasting a lot of water, it's reducing the hydrostatic pressure in the system. An expert with specialized training should be brought in to supervise the plugging of both flowing and non-flowing artesian wells. The first steps are the same as for other wells. The objective is to restrict the water to the formation where it came from. This prevents it from entering another aquifer in a multiple aquifer system. To make sure the grout penetrates the borehole wall, you first have to rip or perforate it with a special machine. We install a seal in the impermeable materials at the top of the aquifer, or place a continuous grout plug throughout the entire borehole. This second method is the one that best conserves both the yield and the hydrostatic pressure in the aquifer, and is the one recommended by EPA. Next, we remove the casing 4 feet below the surface. And finally, we finish with the usual mounding procedure.
Let me ask you about well pits. If you have one that's several feet deep, shouldn't you treat it like part of the casing and dig out the walls at least 4 feet below the surface?
Yes, that's right. But one of the walls should be removed entirely to keep the pit from holding water. Then, just as with a dug well, a bentonite seal 1 to 2 feet thick should be poured.
And compacted soil completes the job.
Bill, there's no doubt that well plugging procedures can be complicated. And there are differences in the procedures depending upon the type of well, the geologic conditions, and other factors. So the important thing to remember is that well plugging is a vital part of proper conservation planning. Our goal is to ensure water quality.
Make sure good records are kept throughout the entire process. Most states require that the land user file those records with the appropriate agency. The well's location should be carefully recorded in the file. The land user may also wish to physically mark the location. It's your responsibility to know all the pertinent state and local laws and regulations so that you can guide the land user to the right agency.
Remember, abandoned wells are a safety hazard, and plugging is the only solution. Water quantity, water quality, and people are all part of the water conservation formula. Attention to the whole picture will avert future problems. Our resource base is worth the effort. Right, Bill?
Right.
Harris. My job as district conservationist requires knowing the factors that affect water quality in my district and working to improve them. The quality of our nation's water deserves careful attention. Significant federal, state, and local resources focus on attaining a comprehensive groundwater protection program. Remember in the first video of this series, a farm family worried about the quality of their water. Rural residents and landowners depend on domestic water supplies. Acceptable water quality varies depending on the water's intended use. For instance, the quality of water for livestock or irrigation differs from that needed for domestic uses. The federal government establishes the MCL, or maximum contaminant level, for public drinking water. In some cases, water quality standards for private wells fall under federal and state regulations. However, for most private wells, water quality is not regulated. For the land user's safety, we recommend periodic analysis to ensure that the water quality remains suitable and acceptable for its intended use. The well owner may need test results interpreted. In the next few minutes, we'll identify common sources of contaminants, list typical types of contaminants, describe the transmission routes of these contaminants, provide an overview of how to take water samples and evaluate the results, and present reasonable alternatives when the results prove unacceptable. We know that contaminants affect water quality, but where do these contaminants come from? Hi, Sharon. Thanks for coming by. County Extension Agent Sharon Jones has agreed to help us find out.
Sure, Bill. I'm glad to help out. The idea of pure as a mountain stream misleads us. There exists no naturally pure water. Everyone's heard of acid rain. We know the quality of the air can affect the quality of precipitation that falls through it. However, neither air pollution nor acid rain are exclusively modern phenomenon. For millions of years, volcanic eruptions have spewed ash and poisonous gases into the atmosphere. Forest and grass fires, as well as decaying organic matter, also release gases into the atmosphere. Rain contains some amounts of acid, and this isn't always bad. Without some acidity, we wouldn't have the beauty of Carlsbad Caverns or Mammoth Cave. As acid water infiltrates the soil and becomes groundwater, soil and mineral particles dissolve. The water eventually reaches the water table, where it joins the flow system. An aquifer's composition and the amount of dissolved material affect water taste, color, odor, and hardness. Water contained in different aquifers reveals differing chemistries as well as qualities. Dissolved constituents or contaminants do not always cause problems, and in low levels may even be beneficial, as in the case of fluoride. Human activities significantly increase the kinds and amounts of contaminants being introduced into the groundwater. Some of these contaminants can be very toxic, and minute amounts should arouse an increased concern.
You're right, Sharon. Likely sources of farmstead contaminants include application of agricultural or lawn and garden chemicals, household chemicals and waste, animal waste, misfunctioning septic fields, waste management systems, landfills and dumps, chemical spills, oil and gas industry operations, and silos and other silage storing facilities.
Most substances put on or in the ground can be suspended or dissolved and transported by moving water and may eventually reach the farmstead well. Many factors affect how much of a particular contaminant might reach the well. One of the more important factors is distance. In most cases, groundwater moves rather slowly, often only a few feet per year. Generally, changes in the water's quality occur gradually over a long time. However, concentrated activities and close proximity of many contaminants to well locations allow farmstead wells to be affected more quickly.
Many people believe that the earth is a natural filter, and to some extent this is true. However, the concentrations of some substances are only slightly diminished through travel through the soil. There are also various routes to the aquifer which do not adequately filter the water through soil and rocks. These routes include poorly constructed, deteriorating, or improperly sealed wells and boreholes, injection wells, mines and gravel pits, back siphoning from chemical mixing or chemigation, macropores and fractures in soil and rock, and sinkholes.
Based on odors or appearances, some contamination may be quite obvious, but many other contaminants are detected only through laboratory analysis. Remember to regularly analyze water quality and keep accurate records.
New wells need testing to establish the initial water quality, then analysis at least once a year. Regular analysis can indicate declining trends in water quality and provide early detection of problems. Early identification of these problems enables some corrections through proper management or rehabilitation, saving both time and money. This water may look clear and has no odor, but would you drink it?
I don't think so, at least not without knowing where it came from. Numerous contaminants have been found in groundwater. Water has several physical characteristics we can identify with our senses: color, taste, odor, but there may be other characteristics that make it unacceptable for drinking. The major characteristics of water can be divided into 4 basic groups. They generally require separate lab analyses to determine existing contaminant levels. Water's 4 major characteristic groupings are physical, chemical, biological, and radiological. We've mentioned water's physical characteristics, so let's move on to the chemical characteristics. These include both natural and introduced contaminants like iron, lead, oil, pesticides, and solvents. Trace elements such as selenium and arsenic.
Yes, even arsenic can be present in small amounts. The presence of these or other contaminants can be verified only by laboratory analysis.
Biological analysis provides an indication of the sanitary quality of water. Fecal coliform bacteria are commonly found in private wells. Finding these organisms in well water suggests the presence of animal or human waste. But there's good news. Coliform tests, which are absolutely essential, are fairly inexpensive. Although coliform bacteria are not dangerous in and of themselves, they indicate the possible presence of much more harmful organisms that can cause diseases such as typhoid, dysentery, or other gastrointestinal disorders.
It is also a good practice to test wells for sulfur and iron bacteria. These organisms can significantly impair well operation.
Radiological analysis is important in areas where problems with radon and radium contaminants have occurred. Wells in these areas should be tested for radiological contaminants.
So, now you know why neither of us would drink this water without having it tested.
Also, we should be aware of the contaminants most likely to occur in our area. This helps determine the type of lab tests that need to be run, while at the same time controlling test cost by allowing only tests pertinent to the area to be performed. Consult your state, county health, or water resource agencies for further advice.
Both price and quality are important. In some states, state and federal agencies, farm bureaus, and other organizations sponsor drinking water programs. These programs can offer water quality analysis at reduced cost. For assistance, your first information source is the county official responsible for potable water quality. Understanding your individual state regulations is critical since many states have specific testing requirements and some states provide low-cost or even free water testing. Laboratory methods for most water quality parameters are standardized to meet EPA requirements. Be sure that the lab you select uses EPA-approved drinking water analytical methods.
The lab will give specific instructions on sampling procedures, packaging, and delivery. They may even provide containers for sample gathering. Sampling instructions vary depending on the nature of suspected contaminants. It is most important to use whatever means necessary to guarantee that the sample is not altered or contaminated by the sampling process. Incorrect sampling methods inevitably lead to inaccurate results.
Follow instructions carefully. A few more suggestions for proper methods of water quality analysis are: sample water from the faucet closest to the well before it goes through any treatment unit. Never sample from a hose or leaky faucets. Contaminants may have been introduced.
And they can also be introduced through the delivery system or home water treatment units. Additional samples can be taken to identify any contaminants introduced at the use points in the home. Be cautious with interpretation of test results. The reliability of the data depends on correct sampling procedures as well as quality lab analyses.
Jim, Jeannie, come on in. I'd like to introduce you to our county extension agent, Sharon Jones. Sharon, this is Jim and Jeannie Barnes.
Hi, it's good to meet you. Bill, we got the results back on our water analysis.
Great.
Can you tell us what they mean?
Well, let's take a look. Did you follow instructions carefully?
Yes, I think so.
You didn't contaminate this sample, did you?
No, I don't think so. We sent it to one of the labs that was on the list you gave us.
What do you think? Is the water safe to drink?
Well, just from glancing over this information, the figures seem to fall within acceptable limits, except this coliform.
What do we do?
Well, even a small amount should be checked out.
Okay, where do we start?
You should talk to your county health officials. Jim, you should at least resample the water, and they'll tell you about all that. You might also want to go through the Farmstead assessment system. Sharon, maybe you should explain it.
Well, Bill, the program is called Farm Assist, and it helps you determine possible farmstead-related causes of water contamination. I think it might be a real help to you.
What do I do now?
Well, don't jump to any conclusions.
Jim, Jeannie, there are some things we can do to try to help you reverse your situation, but you might want to consider treating your water or an alternate water source. We can get started on the pharmacist program now, Jim.
Thanks, Sharon. Bill?
We'll let you know what we find out.
During your career, you will experience many similar situations. Jeannie and Jim's problem turned out to be bad water sampling techniques. They will be taking regular water samples and working toward correcting other activities that could affect their water source.
Hi, I'm Bill Harris. Would you drink this water?
I think we agree. We shouldn't drink the water until we know it's safe.
I knew she'd say that. Allow me to introduce Lisa Thomas, a fellow district conservationist. We're discussing alternatives for water treatment. The point is, analysis of water samples is important.
Of course, analysis of water samples must be performed, Bill. Let's take a look at what exactly is safe. The intended use dictates what constitutes acceptable water quality. When a private well is the only source of water to rural residences and contains undesirable or unsafe properties, what are the alternatives for treatment?
Water treatment may be the only option if the source of the problem cannot be identified or corrected. This presentation assists in understanding the proper treatment systems needed when water quality problems exist. This video will emphasize the importance of proper maintenance of a chosen system. An improperly maintained system concentrates contaminants and increases health risks. After this presentation, one should be able to describe when and why water treatment is necessary, describe alternatives other than water treatment to consider in selecting a system, describe the 6 major types of treatment methods and the problems they are designed to treat, and discuss the importance of retesting and maintaining the selected system.
Water treatment can protect health. Waterborne pathogens and contaminants may produce acute and chronic health problems. Ironically, many water contaminants that cause health problems, such as disease-causing organisms, some pesticides, selenium, lead, and nitrates, may not affect water's taste, color, or odor.
Treatment systems relieve long-term problems that have no short-term solutions. However, all systems have some limitations. Examine alternatives before a water treatment system is installed. This includes eliminating existing sources of contamination and changing activities around the well to prevent possible future contamination. A clean and safe source of water may be developed by rehabilitating and properly maintaining the existing well, or even drilling a new well at an alternate location. Plug any unused wells.
One might consider bottled water as an alternative drinking water source. The Food and Drug Administration considers bottled water a food and regulates its production. It also issues quality standards to ensure that bottled water is safe to use. These alternatives to water treatment should always be considered when a water quality problem occurs. Sometimes, water treatment is the most practical alternative.
Working with the SCS, I deal with water quality from different angles. I need some answers about water treatment systems. Lisa?
Sure, Bill. Knowing the contaminants, we can determine if the delivery system is introducing the contaminants that are found. If the delivery system is the problem, it can often be corrected at the source, eliminating the need for treatment.
When water treatment is needed or desirable, where do we go? This water sense wheel gives me some idea, but we need more information. This great little tool describes likely contaminants and treatments for typical symptoms.
Yes, I use one also. Let's see what it says about white scum on a glass.
Okay, let's see. It says it's caused by elevated levels of calcium and magnesium salts. But in this case, it doesn't say anything about federal standards or health effects. It says the treatment option is ion exchanger, water softener.
Bill, the key to any water treatment unit is that the system must be matched to the contaminants needing to be removed. Because someone has a water treatment system or unit does not mean that it is controlling their problem. Bill, let's review this tape on the 6 main types of systems.
Good idea, Lisa.
Welcome to Basic Water Treatment Systems. Water treatment units can be installed in many locations within the distribution system. Installation can be in the well, at the point of entry, or at the point of use. Most home treatment systems are installed at the point of use because you don't need water treatment everywhere. For example, lawns and gardens don't require treated water. The needs at each point should be evaluated and the water treated only where required. There are 6 main types of systems: disinfection, ion exchange, filtration, reverse osmosis, distillation, and aeration. Let's start with disinfection. Disinfection is the only way to purify water in the microbiological sense. It kills bacteria and virus. The most typical disinfectant is chlorine, although others are used. The disinfectant goes into the water system from any place within the system, from the well to the point of use. Proper disinfection controls potentially harmful organisms, but does not affect other contaminants like petroleum products or salts. Disinfectant units are relatively inexpensive and easily maintained. Maintenance can be performed by the homeowner. It involves testing for disinfectant concentrations and mixing and replacing the source of disinfectant. Also, they require regular cleaning and periodic mechanical or electrical servicing. Some disadvantages to this system are due to chlorination adding taste and odor to the water. Usually, an added carbon filter minimizes chlorinated organic compound formations. More common methods of water treatment are water softeners. Water softeners are really ion exchange systems. These units remove the ions which cause hardness. For example, calcium and magnesium can form white scum residue on glasses, dishes, silverware, sinks, and tubs. Water softeners replace magnesium and calcium with other ions, usually sodium. The softeners don't reduce the amount of total dissolved solids in the water. They replace one type of ion for another. Ion exchange systems work on some inorganics and metals, but they don't purify the water. Water softeners reduce the amount of soap and hot water needed. They reduce scale buildup in pipes, eliminate staining of clothes and fixtures. They reduce films left on dishes and your skin. A wide variety of softeners are available. The smallest units will fit under a kitchen sink. Softened water runs throughout the house, but not on plants, lawns, and gardens. Since sodium can cause health risk for some people, commonly the cold water for the kitchen sink bypasses the softener. This gives people the calcium and magnesium in the hard water and eliminates the risks associated with sodium. The water softening process can make the water more corrosive. Maintenance varies with the unit. Many units only require salt replacement at regular intervals. Another method of water treatment is filtration. The main types of filtration systems include sediment cartridge and carbon filter units. These are absorption units which remove turbidity. However, they do not disinfect the water. Sediment cartridge filters use sand, diatomaceous earth, paper, or ceramic filter material. They remove sand, silt, and rust particles. Some of the sediment cartridge filters remove microorganisms, but most remove only large particles. Carbon filters use activated charcoal and remove odors and swampy tastes along with chlorides and some organics. These units are very easy to take care of. Most only require replacement of the filters. However, replacement is important since the filters can provide a breeding ground for bacteria if not changed regularly. These three methods of water treatment handle the largest quantities of water and can be used to treat most of the water used in homes. The next two methods treat smaller volumes of water and are normally found only in the kitchen. For drinking water and cooking, the average household only needs 5 gallons per day. That's less than 1% of the total household usage. The first of these smaller volume water treatment methods is reverse osmosis. These units force water through a membrane with small pores. Only the water and other small molecules will fit through the membrane. In other words, they remove the water from the contaminant. Water then flushes the contaminant away from the membrane. These units can be relatively expensive, but they will treat a variety of problems that almost no other system will. Reverse osmosis units will process a high percentage of dissolved arsenic, lead, selenium, benzene, and petroleum. To be effective, these units require large volumes of water to flush the membrane. Most units only recover 10 to 30% of the total water used. The average unit will treat about 5 gallons of chlorinated water per day. Reverse osmosis units usually incorporate a sediment pre-filter to prevent clogging of the membrane. A charcoal post filter and usually are installed under or near the kitchen sink or even on the counter. Depending on the manufacturer, some units can be complicated. However, in most cases, the units are relatively simple and only require regular replacement of the membrane and filters. The next system is called vented distillation. This process removes almost all substances by boiling raw water and then collecting the condensed steam. Any volatile gases are released through safety vents. This is one of the most complicated systems. Distillation systems are generally impractical on a large scale. However, they can be economical for drinking water, since the average home unit will produce from 3 to 20 gallons of water per day, and they can be installed on the counter or under the sink. The distilled water dribbles into a storage tank for use. However, the water usually tastes pretty bland. Distillation units are usually cleaned by allowing acids to remain in the unit overnight and then flushing out the acid the next morning. Some units require scrubbing by hand. Remember that boiling water requires energy and can be relatively expensive to operate. Now let's look at the aeration methods of water treatment. These systems are used primarily to remove volatile gases from water. Many people are concerned about radon, and some have chosen to install aeration systems to treat all of the water that enters their home. Aeration systems also work on hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide gases, as well as removing some organic chemicals. Some units pump air, which agitates the water, releasing radon and other gases, while other units introduce water to the top of an aeration tower. The water trickles down through the packing elements within the tower and spreads the water out to enhance water contact. The air passes up through the bed, removing contaminants from the water. These units work well, particularly for volatile organic chemicals, and they are not expensive, easily installed, and simple to maintain. Water treatment systems must match and efficiently accommodate the contaminants needing to be removed from the water. The first step before water treatment is knowing what the contaminants are and determining the source of those contaminants. Examine all alternatives before making a decision on water treatment.
After the homeowner determines which treatment option works best for them, do you have any advice about the unit to choose?
Yes, remember to consider concentration of contaminants, equipment costs, operation and maintenance, ease of use, and also the volume of water required.
The Environmental Protection Agency does not approve or disapprove of these units.
They assign numbers to these units based on the types of systems. It seems important that we coordinate our services and work together with all support groups, government agencies, and organizations in a joint effort to get information out to educate and assist private well owners.
Let's get going, Lisa. I'm Bill Harris. Welcome back. In this presentation, we will be looking at farmstead features in relation to water well locations and explaining principles of subsurface conditions that affect those locations. We will also become familiar with the terms, principles, and concepts of both existing and potential well locations. District conservationists for the Soil Conservation Service meet with families that are concerned about their water wells.
Oh, it's hot out there. That'll take a lot out of you.
Oh, I know. Go easy on the water. The well's not pumping much.
Oh, that old problem again?
The pressure is low and the water is getting worse. We got the test results of that sample we sent in. We'll probably have to get a new well.
Yeah, we've postponed working on that problem about as long as we can. You know, Lisa Thomas told us that because of all the over-pumping we've been doing on the farm, that the well's been pumping sand and wearing down the pump impellers. You know, I can even hear water cascading down the well casing.
It means the casing is failing. We need to get it repaired or even drill a new well. Remember what Lisa had pointed out when she was here to go over the Farm Bureau checklist?
Yeah, and we need to plan future changes on the farm so that we don't have the same problem with a new well that we have with the old one.
How much will a new well cost?
I have no idea. You know, when we first moved here, everything was in place, and I just don't know where to begin.
We need some more help. If we're going to spend the money, let's do this right. You know, I'll bet Lisa Thomas could give us some help.
Well, sure. I'll give her a call to meet with us again on the problem. Hey, come on in here, Lisa. Have a seat over here. Well, did like you suggested, and we contacted a driller.
I wasn't surprised to hear from you last week, Joe. When we were discussing your well, I remembered that it was very old, and we had some concerns over the location. I made a note that we were trying to minimize activities that might be affecting the well.
Yeah, that's right. We're having some serious problems, and well, we've decided to drill a new well.
Yes, we want to do it right. We don't want any more problems. Do you have any suggestions?
I'll certainly try to help. Let's start with the information you'll need. First, we need the detailed drawing of your farmstead that we discussed during my last visit. It should show some locations of potential contaminant sources, the ones on the checklist.
Yeah, we've got the drawing that we did during the Farm Assist program, that one with Sharon Jones. And we took care to make the drawing to scale.
Great. Make sure it shows all items identified on the Farm Assist and Farm Bureau materials, such as the old well, septic system, fuel storage, and drainage patterns. Don't forget to show the water lines going to feedlots and other buildings. You must locate all underground and overhead utilities, such as gas lines and electric lines. You don't want to drill into a gas line or lift the tower of the drill rig into an electric line.
No, that wouldn't be a good idea.
Here's a list of agencies that the Extension Services and our offices compiled. Contact these offices to get the necessary permits and determine the requirements such as setback distances.
What are the requirements for those distances?
They vary. There may not be requirements for setback distances from sources you identify. However, the EPA recommends a minimum of 50 feet. Remember, this is for a properly constructed well. There are no safe distances for a poorly constructed one. Also, agency requirements are minimum, so you should increase distances when you can.
With your help, I think we will be able to plot the possible new well locations.
Well, I think we understand, but do you think we'll hit water?
In most cases, it's not a question of will we hit water, but how deep will we have to go to find a reliable source of good quality water. I checked with our geologist from the state office. She loaned me some geological maps that might give us a clue. Has anyone drilled a new well in your area lately?
You know, Carlotta Johnson had a new well drilled down at her place just this last month.
Her well may indicate what you might find. You can also check with some well drillers and agencies on the list I gave you. See if they have records of wells in your area or any guidelines you should follow.
That's a good idea.
Well, what's your next step, Lisa?
I'd like to help you evaluate the landscape for a good site. In the meantime, if your water's bad, you could use bottled water until your new well is completed.
Well, let's get started on that evaluation, Lisa.
Carlotta said we could get drinking water from their new well while our well is being drilled. She said their well is about 120 feet deep.
Yeah, it's about 30 feet deeper than our well, and Well, they got plenty of good water over there.
That's a good sign. It agrees with the geologist's report on aquifers in the area. Apparently there's a water table aquifer. She called it an unconfined aquifer. And groundwater flow will be roughly parallel to the topography, flowing toward the creek. Now the well should be between 120 and 150 feet deep. Moving the well site across your farmstead won't make a difference in the total depth of the well or the yield. Let's take a look at your drawing of the farmstead.
Well, now here's the house, okay, and that fence over there, and the barn, and our old well back over there. You can see the pipelines drawn in here. Now these red lines are the gas lines and the electric lines. Now we measured our setbacks from the potential contamination sources, and we think we got some pretty good spots picked out for the new well. One over here by the road, right here in the front yard, that empty lot back over there, and that depression.
Does water ever stand in that depression?
Yes, during extremely rainy weather.
Oh, then you want to stay away from that location. You don't want surface water ponding on the wellhead. It might get in and take pollutants with it. What about this site by the road? This isn't bad, but does the state spread salt for snow on the road in the winter?
You know, I never thought of that. They sure do.
Salt on the roads isn't a big problem, but avoiding it would be better. Also, if there happens to be an accident or a spill from the road, it could affect the well. Let's take a look at your other sites and see if they're better.
What about the front yard, Lisa?
This looks good. It's high enough that water drains away, and it's not close to major contaminant sources, except possibly yard chemicals or fertilizer.
We could work around that. I've been wanting a decorative little rock garden, and this would be a good area for it.
This wall could fit right in with the landscaping.
You know, I really think that back lot might be better. We never use fertilizers back there, and it shouldn't be that difficult to get the water down to the house. And the connections to the existing water lines to the other buildings shouldn't be too hard. And I can bypass that old well, and we can use existing lines for supplies.
But before we decide on the front yard or the back lot, Joe, I'd like to talk to the driller and see what's involved in drilling.
Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea.
Let me know when your new well's completed. I'll stop by for a drink of water.
That's a deal, Lisa.
Thanks for your help, Lisa. We really appreciate it.
Oh, one more thing. Make sure you get the old well plugged. The well driller could help you with that while he's out here. You don't want contaminants getting into the old well and migrating into the new one. Inside this package is a brochure that explains why the well should be sealed and how it should be done.
Yeah, thanks. I hadn't really thought about what we do with the old well, but I sure don't want it to cause any problems.
No, we don't want anyone to get hurt. We'll definitely have that taken care of.
Well, good luck with your well.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Peter. Bye.
Locating new well is an investment in future water supplies. When locating a well, use good geologic data and follow setback regulations from the state or local agency that has the authority. If no regulation is in effect, use 50 feet. Remember, regulations are minimum. Greater distances can provide more protection. Stay away from low places. The location should provide good drainage away from the well. Watch for other potential sources of contamination. Road salts are locations where accidents or spills could occur. They may only exist for a short time, but they can cause long-term damage. If the well must be placed in a location that may not be aesthetically pleasing, landscaping can help overcome some objections. Location is one of the most important parts of planning a new well.
Hello again. I'm Bill Harris, District Conservationist. Welcome to Well Design and Construction. This video should be viewed in conjunction with the previous video, Module 5, on well location. This series won't make you an expert, but you will become aware of what is necessary to get a good well, and be able to relate the information along to the rural residents in your district. A good well should provide enough quality water to meet present needs and any future needs that might occur during the life of the well. It must be efficient to reduce pumping and maintenance costs and be protected from contamination.
Joe, Kathy. Well, we're getting a good start on your well.
Well, thanks for letting us watch the drilling process at the Miller farm last week.
You know, we got our permit and we got the log for the old well and we got the geologist's report, but I'm still not clear about the whole process.
Well, if you remember last week, the well consists of two parts, an upper part or case section. Now that helps support the borehole, acts as a housing for the pumping equipment, and stores the water entering the well. And then there's a lower part located in the aquifer that's called the intake section, which lets water into the well and keeps the aquifer materials out. Now these parts serve different functions, and this should be recognized during design and construction.
Well, can you tell us a little more about that upper case section?
For sure. The casing, in combination with a formation seal, provides structural strength and seals against contamination. Casing is usually made of steel or PVC. The type of casing you use will depend on the factors including cost, depth, and groundwater chemistry. The thickness of the casing depends on the depth of the well, and particularly the difference in pressure between the inside and outside of the casing. The size of the pump is an important factor when choosing the diameter of the casing. 4-inch pumps will produce up to 100 gallons per minute, which is normally sufficient for farmstead use. 4-inch pumps will fit in a 5-inch casing, but if there are any irregularities or the case is out of plumb, installation and maintenance may be more difficult. This is why I recommended using 6-inch casing for your well, since it will provide for your home and for livestock.
There wasn't much difference in cost unless we had gone with thinner or used casing.
These materials should be new and meet all state and industry standards. Thin-walled or used casing is never a bargain in the long run.
Well, now how deep should the casing be?
All wells need surface casing to protect them from contamination, but the amount of below-surface casing depends on the geology.
What about the lower part of the well?
That's the intake section. It's designed to provide as much flow as needed while preventing the aquifer materials from entering the well. Like most, your well will use a screen designed for the formation. If the aquifer material is very fine, a coarser grain material called a filter pack is installed between the aquifer and the screen.
Stan, how long should the screen be?
The length of the screen depends on the thickness and materials of the aquifer, and also the available drawdown.
So, to design our screen, you'll have to sample our aquifer.
Kathy, you're exactly right. Improperly designed or constructed intakes and screens will result in sand pumping and inefficient or deficient wells. In many poorly constructed wells, holes have been merely cut in the casing with a saw or torch to allow the water to enter. These large holes can weaken the casing and provide an inefficient entryway for the water. They can also allow large amounts of sand to flow into the well, which can damage the pumping equipment. Replacement of an inadequate intake section is often impractical. We make sure an appropriate well screen will be installed at the time of construction by sampling the cuttings from the borehole. We design an intake slot size on the well based on the distribution of particle sizes in the material. The slot width is then selected that will retain 25 to 40% of the material on the outside of the screens. This allows finer particles to be pumped out during well development. The slot size may be decreased slightly to retain 50% of the materials if there's some doubt about the reliability of the samples or if the water is very corrosive.
Now, what are these filter packs?
Well, if the aquifer materials are uniform and fine-grained, or the sediments are laminated, filter packing should be considered. Filter packs are sometimes known as gravel packs. Filter pack wells have a zone immediately around the well screen filled with a specially graded material. Filter packs are composed of a narrow range of grain sizes to assure good porosity and permeability. The gradation should be chosen to retain most of the formation material outside of the screen. The screen opening is then selected to retain about 90% of the filter pack after development.
Well, now why else would we install filter packs?
Well, a filter pack is recommended when a slot size, based on the size of the aquifer material, is too small to accommodate the desired yield, generally less than 10/1000ths of an inch. When the screen is smaller than the hole, the annular space is filled with gravel to keep the hole from caving. This is called a formation stabilizer. The procedure and type of materials used are similar to filter packs. However, the purpose is considerably different. A pack used in this way is not expected to filter out the aquifer materials and does not need the same gradation.
Well, now what keeps the contaminants from flowing down the outside of the casing?
Well, a borehole diameter is larger than the casing diameter. This open space, known as an annular space, provides a direct pathway for contamination from the surface or from poor quality aquifers the well intersects above the principal aquifer. This annulus must be sealed to protect the aquifer. Most states specify minimum depths of grout, but our company makes it a practice to grout from the top of the aquifer to the ground surface. Grouts normally consist of Portland cement and water and may contain additives. Some state laws dictate grout formulation. We will be using 94 pounds of Portland cement mixed with 6 1/2 gallons of water and 3 to 5 pounds of bentonite. Bentonite will hold the cement particles in suspension, reduce the shrinkage, and improve the mixture. The bentonite and water will be mixed first and then the cement added. We place the grout from the bottom up through a small diameter pipe called a trimmy. After the casing is centered in the hole, the trimmy pipe is lowered to the bottom of the hole outside of the casing. The trimmy pipe is removed as the grout is pumped into the annulus. This method will ensure that the entire annulus is filled.
What else can we do to protect our well?
Several other things must be done to protect the well from surface contamination. The casing should extend at least 12 inches above the ground surface. Domestic wells need reinforced concrete slabs around the casing. The slab should be at least 4 inches thick, slope away from the well, and extend 2 feet in all directions. Air vents should be screened to prevent entry of rodents and insects. A check valve installed at the beginning of the distribution system will prevent backflow of water into the well.
Did you have any idea a well requires this much expertise?
No, I sure didn't. Well, Stan, what else is involved?
Well, now that you folks are familiar with the parts of the well, let's take a look at the drilling process. Wells are constructed by several different methods. Here, we are using the air rotary method of drilling. No matter what method is used, damage is done to the formation immediately surrounding the borehole. This occurs most with the rotary drilling process that uses drilling mud to wash cuttings away from the borehole. The mud forms a cake on the walls of the borehole to prevent the loss of circulation during drilling, but this also prevents the flow of water into the well. Unless the mud cake is removed, the yield will be greatly reduced. In sandy aquifers, we remove the naturally occurring fine material in the area of the well screen. These removal steps are goals of well development.
What is involved in well development?
There are many methods, but one common and effective method is to use a high-velocity water or air jet. The agitating action of the jet breaks up any mud cake sealing the borehole wall and washes the fine aquifer material into the well where we can pump it out. Removing the finer aquifer materials near the screen increases the permeability near the well and the well efficiency. Drilling tools can cause contaminants to reach the aquifer. Now, this is particularly true of iron bacteria. We disinfect the drilling tools between jobs and during the drilling process. We also disinfect the well each day to keep it purified.
Now, when it's finished, Stan, how do you know you've got a good well?
Once the well is completed, but before the final pumping equipment is installed, we test the well performance. And we do this by pumping for a minimum of 24 hours for confined aquifers and 72 hours for unconfined aquifers. Then we take a water sample for analysis. This information allows us to calculate drawdown and yield and determines how deep to place the pump to stay below the maximum drawdown at the selected pumping rate. We recommend that our customers either install an air line or an open pipe that gives access to the bottom of the hole, allowing them to monitor the performance of the well. The open pipe allows measurement of the total depth of the hole. An airline won't allow you to measure the total depth, but it makes measuring the drawdown easier. Monitoring drawdown and yield annually is necessary to give you the information you need to carry out a good program of maintenance and rehabilitation.
Now, what about installing the pump?
Pumps and intakes shouldn't be installed next to the screen. Turbulence can damage the screen. The pump or inlet needs to be placed above or below the screen, but placed below the expected drawdown levels. Throughout the installation and testing, we will keep accurate records in this well log. Joe, you and Kathy need to maintain accurate records too. Before you can use the well, the water must be disinfected. Now, this is also the time to start periodic water sampling and testing.
Well, thanks, Stan. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. Hey, do we get to keep these hard hats? Or?
No, I think I better give that back to the company.
Okay.
Well,
We appreciate everything.
yeah, thanks a lot.
Did a good job.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Geologic information will be a great help to you in making a decision on the type of well to construct and the quantity and quality of water that you can expect to find. Choose the location carefully and follow regulations and permit procedures. A reputable company should be used to drill the well. Check with other landowners for references and get written estimates. Ask questions of the driller about casing, sealing, grouting, well screens, filter backs, and well development. Drillers who don't take these things seriously shouldn't be used. Following these points ensures an efficient and long-lasting well. Hi, I'm Bill Harris. Welcome to Module 7, Well Maintenance and Rehabilitation. This video will help you understand and identify common causes of well failures, know how to monitor problems, and what kind of corrective actions can be taken. In the next few minutes, we will cover the following objectives. Identify indicators and causes of poor well performance using records and periodic monitoring of the well. Determine when rehabilitation of the well is needed and when replacing it is more cost-effective. And identify common rehabilitation techniques. Joe and Kathy Gibson finished construction of their new well. Now it's time to see how a maintenance and rehabilitation plan works.
Oh, I'm sure glad to have that well finished. I sure learned a lot during the drilling, though. Stan finished that pumping test yesterday. Honey, do you have those results around here somewhere?
Oh, sure. Here are the drill logs, results of the pumping test, and information about the pump they installed. The water samples have been sent to the lab.
Well, we have all the information here. Looks like Lisa said to get started on that well maintenance program. I'm a little concerned about what all's involved. I thought it was going to be something like an extended warranty, but God, this looks like a lot more.
A well maintenance program means with proper care our well could last for decades. They say it's simple, and a program can be tailored for our well. Lisa Thomas gave us all of this information and a checklist.
People often think well maintenance is complicated, but by comparing initial records of a well with information gathered in later years, owners can identify any decreases in their well's performance. The checklist includes reductions in well yield, wells pumping sand and silt or changes in color, taste or smell of the water. These indicators can be tracked by regular testing and inspection. Once the cause of poor well performance is established, proper rehabilitation procedures can be identified. Some causes of well failures are inadequate well design or construction, slime, chemical, biological, or mechanical incrustation, corrosion of the screen, casing, or pump, collapse of the well casing, or failure of the pump and fixtures. Declining yields may be caused by seasonal water shortages, general water level changes, or interference from other nearby wells. Inadequate well design or construction problems occur when the geologic and water quality condition weren't properly considered. Some problems are inappropriately sized or located screens, poor grouting techniques, and inadequate well development. Many well failures are caused by chemical and biological incrustation. Chemical incrustation occurs when groundwater interacts with materials in the well and the formation right around the screen. This can often precipitate calcium, magnesium, iron, or manganese. Slimy coatings on screens, pumps, and in the formation are called biological incrustations or biofouling. Usually iron and sulfur bacteria cause these problems. They secrete slimy coatings containing precipitated iron and can grow rapidly. They exist naturally in many areas and can be introduced to a well during the drilling process. The movement of fine particles causes two types of problems: mechanical incrustation and damage to pumps. It can result from improper well design, incomplete well development, corrosion of the casing or screen, pumping above the capacity of the formation, or excessive pump cycling. Water movement into a well at velocities greater than 1/10 of a foot per second can dislodge grains in the aquifer, allowing them to flow into the well. Corrosion damages wells by enlarging screen slots and reducing the strength and integrity of the casing. Water with high total dissolved solid concentrations has potential for greater corrosion. Pitting is the result of uneven corrosion. These are some of the problems that plague wells.
Procedures for each well inspection. By keeping good records, we'll be able to compare the results with the previous data from each inspection.
How often should we inspect the well?
Once a year. By using this checklist, we can watch for decreases in water quality and flow and listen for strange noises in the well. Okay, well, let's go through the checklist.
Check the physical condition of the exposed parts for cracks, signs of wear, or incrustation. Also look for uneven settlement of the pad or ground around the pump.
Well, I could fix any of those problems.
Now we record the static water level and the pumping water level.
Well, that's easy because we installed the air line during construction.
Okay, now to measure the total depth, we use the drop pipe. Without that, we couldn't measure it without pulling the pump. The drawdown is the difference between the static water level and the pumping water level. Here's the pumping graph the driller gave us. Our water dropped off rapidly the first hour and then slowed down and leveled off. So our pumping water level should be measured after an hour.
And we check the yield at the same time using a 5-gallon bucket.
These measurements determine the specific capacity, which is the yield divided by the drawdown.
I see. And if we compare measurements regularly, we'll know if it's decreasing.
As the decrease approaches 25%, it's time to rehabilitate the system. If it decreases more than 25%, it may be too late to save our well. What about the sand our old well was pumping?
Well, then we pour the bucket of water through a filter, and this allows us to catch and accurately measure the volume of sand in the water. You know, I'll bet if we'd been taking measurements in our old well, we'd have noticed our problem a lot earlier.
Yes, Joe. It also says here pump failures can create decreased yields. So we should check the pump first and make sure we're following the manufacturer's maintenance recommendations.
Now that we've helped Joe and Kathy develop a well maintenance plan, let's discuss options once a problem has been identified. An assessment of cost effectiveness is necessary. Sometimes rehabilitation is neither economical nor technically possible. Every well will ultimately fail. Cost of rehabilitating the well should be compared with cost of drilling a new well and plugging the old one. Make sure a new well will take care of the problem that caused the failure of the old one. Rehabilitation techniques vary depending on the cause of deterioration. Some of these techniques require specialized equipment and can be very dangerous without proper technical skills. Only experts can assure an adequate increase in well performance without damaging the well or injuring the workers. Acidifying a well with chemical incrustation is one treatment that should be left to experts. Several acids can be used in different forms. Each has advantages and disadvantages. Some acids can create deadly gases and must be handled with care. Acidifying a well requires agitating acid that has been put into the hole and forcing the acid into the surrounding formation. Acid dissolves the encrusting materials and is then pumped from the well and disposed of according to local regulations. Depending on the degree of the well damage, acid treatments can restore the well to its original capacity and may even improve the well's performance. If chemical incrustation is a problem in the area, new wells should be constructed with casing and screen materials that will withstand repeated acid treatments. For biological incrustations in slime, chlorine or other strong oxidizing agents kill bacteria in the well. Alternating acid and chlorine treatments breaks up accumulated slimes. These chemicals must never be mixed in the well. In areas where iron or sulfur bacteria are common, systems that continually chlorinate the well water will reduce the amount of rehabilitation treatments required. For treatment of mechanical incrustation or physical plugging, techniques are the same procedures used to develop a new well. These treatments mechanically agitate the water in the borehole to break up the incrustation. Chemicals may also aid in removing silt and clay particles. These rehabilitation techniques are the most common. However, other techniques used are sonar jets, explosives, and dry ice. Hydrofracking or reaming the hole can also increase well yields. If well parts are corroded, they may be replaced or rebuilt. Replacing a well screen is usually less expensive than drilling a new well. A new screen with a smaller diameter can be telescoped into place. Grouting the old screen and deepening the well can be another solution. Grout can seal off heavily corroded sections, which allow large amounts of sediment to enter the well. After well rehabilitation is complete, a new pumping test must be performed to provide a reference point for future comparison. Following an inspection and maintenance program sustains the yield and life of a well. The appropriate rehabilitation technique saves a deteriorating well and may be more practical and economical than drilling a new one. With the knowledge of how to inspect and maintain a well, the land user saves money and preserves a valuable source of water.